Do you want to see something fantastic? Just take a look. This three-dimensional image has come to us straight from the prehistoric age. Time stopped for this insect millions of years ago. Our camera may be very sophisticated, but it cannot take us back to the past. This is our real-time travel machine, a piece of amber. Every specimen preserved in this remarkable substance has its own story to tell about the climate, the vegetation, and its own life from a world that has disappeared forever. We're off to the Dominican Republic, where more of these fascinating time travelers are waiting for us. We begin our journey with a quick stopover in a city that was founded 500 years ago. Santo Domingo, one of the oldest cities in the Americas. Christopher Columbus arrived on the island of Hispaniola in 1492. From the first day, he knew that he would find invaluable treasure because the inhabitants gave him a pair of shoes inlaid with pieces of amber. And appropriately enough, his statue seems to be pointing in the direction of the Museum of Amber. This museum is one of the most popular tourist attractions in Santo Domingo. People have been making ornaments out of amber since ancient times. It was always considered a semi-precious stone. It's actually a polymer, a kind of natural plastic that is soft to the touch with a rich golden sheen. Amber. On the second floor is the magnificent collection of Señor Caridad, the owner of this museum. All of his amber pieces contain amazing fossils, many of which are insects. In the middle of the 19th century, scientists began to investigate the surprising properties of amber. The first question that comes to mind is, how did plants and insects get inside such beautiful packages? I'm here on the campus of the Universidad Autónoma to solve the mystery, to find the descendant of the greatest amber producer in the Dominican Republic. This is an algarrobo. 20 million years ago, this tree's ancestors dominated the primeval forest that covered the whole island. All the amber we find today is the byproduct of the resin of these ancient trees. So, set your watches back 20 million years. This scene took place every day millions of years ago in the great Algarrobo forest. A beetle living inside a crack in the bark of a tree walks out of his hiding place to patrol his territory. A little further up the trunk, a branch has been broken by the wind. The tree produces a flood of resin to plug up the wound and to prevent insects from penetrating it. The trickle of thick liquid soon becomes a flood, carrying away its first victim. A throng of ants using this tree trunk as a highway are completely surprised by this torrent of resin. They are submerged, forming a still life of workers trapped forever in marching formation. A wasp, attracted by the sugary smell of the resin, approaches the sticky trap a little too closely. The resin immediately starts to harden as it comes into contact with the air. Then a real miracle takes place. The resin's amazing preservative substances penetrate the insects' bodies and destroy all germs and bacteria. Every trace of water or humidity is removed. The specimen is completely dehydrated and its tissue will no longer deteriorate. This is why we find insects as delicate as this mayfly still intact after millions of years. Modern trees don't produce as much resin as the ancient algarrobos, but the amber is created exactly the same way. The molecules in this chunk of resin have started to fuse, but it will take a few million years more before it becomes as hard as amber. Gradually, dust and plant debris will cover the resin. Some pieces will be washed away and carried to the river bottom or even off to sea. Over time, they will be covered by tons of sediment. Amber is buried deeper than the treasures once hidden by pirates along the coast of Hispaniola. We will have to travel to the north of the country to find it, to the mountains surrounding the city of Santiago. Even if the amber is buried, we may have to do some climbing to get to it. These mountains were formed by geological forces that raised the seabed and layers of sediment that trapped the amber veins. Sometimes amber can be extracted from open pit mines. But here, the seam runs straight through this mountain. Often, the miners must tunnel more than 100 meters to reach it. It's backbreaking work, often performed in stifling heat and humidity. As the tunnel goes deeper, oxygen becomes scarce. But the lure of amber is very powerful. Sí, tiene razón. As you can see, everything here is done by hand because machine vibrations could smash the amber. I'm off to Santiago to get these stones polished. This is the magic moment. Insects which have long ago disappeared are reborn before our very eyes. What we find here are bark and ambrosia beetles. And that should come as no surprise. Much of the resin produced by the algarobo trees was to keep these tiny drilling machines under control. Today, the descendants of these beetles still spend their lives digging tunnels under bark or inside tree trunks. Small mites will even grab on to their backs for a free ride from one tree to another. Every new amber piece reveals different insects that were once living around the algarobo tree. Here is a mantis waiting in ambush. Lower down, near the roots, a centipede is tracking its prey. A spider has spun its web along a small branch. Further along, a fly is taking off. The predator senses vibrations in the air. It's the fly approaching and it lands in the web. In a flash, the spider grabs its prey. A sunbeam falls on a cloud of gnats caught in the fever of their mating dance. Males and females chase and court each other and mate for all eternity. When we study insects in amber, we realize that many of them were pretty advanced for their time. Take these stingless bees. Well, they were building cities 20 million years ago. They still use resin to build the internal structures of their nests. In all likelihood, their ancestors used algarobo resin since many worker bees have been found trapped in it. Gathering resin was a dangerous business because predators would prowl around these resin pools. Perhaps the nastiest of them all was an assassin bug. This insect would coat its front legs with resin. All it had to do then was grab a poor bee with his sticky legs and stab it with his pointed beak. What is most surprising is that certain assassin bugs still use this tactic today. Sometimes they position themselves at the entrance to a stingless bee's hive. They can literally wipe out an entire colony because the bees are vulnerable when they take off and land. But assassin bugs have another trick up their sleeves. The bees trapped in my net are panicking. So they emit a chemical substance that alerts the other bees. But the assassin bugs also recognize this smell. So they rush immediately to my net in order to find an easy meal. One suspects it took the assassin bug millions of years to recognize that odor. Thanks to the amber, we can prove it. Insects in amber also gave us valuable information about the ancient tropical forests where they lived. This magnificent lacework, for example, it's the wing of a large damselfly. This is evidence that there must have been bromeliads on Hispaniola, because their modern descendants only lay their eggs in the water of the leaf reservoirs of these plants. Inversely, plant fragments can also prove the existence of certain insects. Acacia flowers preserved in amber show that pseudo-Myrmex ants existed then, because they always live inside acacia trees. We can say that the social life of termites began more than 20 million years ago, as shown by this brave soldier who died on the field with honor. This tiny homopteron has left a solid heritage for its descendants, a wax fan that has crossed thousands of millennia without losing a feather. The insects we find in amber reveal both the great successes and resounding defeats that have marked their evolution. Despite all our efforts, we will never be able to recreate the majestic primal forest. Almost all the species of plants and insects we find in amber have disappeared today, the victims of mass extinction. Perhaps the catastrophe began with a climate change, or with the invasion of competing species from the continent. Insects sensitive to even the slightest change were probably the first to be affected. With their demise, a domino effect was set in motion. The disappearance of pollinators led to the swift decline of many plant species, and the entire ecosystem soon crumbled. Even the algarobos would disappear, leaving behind thousands of tiny relics frozen in amber as their legacy for future generations. Almost from one day to the next, specialized predators like assassin bugs that focused just on stingless bees found they had no prey. The disappearance of all these insects also had terrible consequences for reptiles, birds, and other insect-eating mammals on the island. Today, human activities are causing another massive extinction, even more damaging than some past natural disasters. Every time I see an insect in amber, I ask myself, how much time do we have before we become a relic of the past?